Today we're trying to take you guys on a mindful. So close. It was so close.
You did great. I need more energy, though. More energy, Frank. More energy.
Hello and welcome to the Net Gains podcast. I am one of your hosts, Frank Field. I currently compete on the AVP Beach Volleyball Tour while also working for one of my co-hosts, Roger Parent's companies. Roger is an ex-CEO, ex-pro athlete, now just a father of three.
You are the host.
The host.
Yeah, you own this.
I'll take
You're doing
it.
all the work anyway.
I know. About time I got a little bit of recognition.
You're just taking over.
All right, so today we're talking about imposter syndrome. It's something that a lot of us experience, I think. But before we jump into that, I wanted to pick your brain about what you do to relax, because we've both been playing a little bit of Fortnite recently, and I think it's kind of funny that sometimes we take on these activities to relax, and they turn out to be so competitive that sometimes it's not even like you're relaxing, and at the end of it, you can just be pissed off or like wired. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I think there's something to be said about that. Like, yeah, competition definitely is what we both enjoy and to do. If I sit there and try to, we've talked about reading books or just sitting there and watching a movie or just sitting on my phone, I feel like I'm wasting just pissing away time. And it's just because it's so unproductive, or I'm not getting better at anything, I'm just sitting here being entertained. I just have a hard time. I just fall asleep doing those things. So yeah, playing games or doing some activity, training, whatever, does relax me. But I think for me, it's more about alone time. I relax when I just have some space. I'm totally fine just being in the gym by myself or even playing games by myself, like a good video game, and that's just because I get so overstimulated with three children, just everybody screaming and everyone just running around and the total chaos and the constant picking up and putting down of children and chasing them around the house. And, it's amazing, but for me, it's more relaxing when I can just, I decompress when I'm just alone.
Yeah, I know what you mean, but I do think it's funny where this competition muscle, it really is a muscle, I think, and this winning is a habit and competition is a habit. So it's funny that even when you and I have talked about this, when we try to relax, we can't turn that piece off. So I mean, I've had times when I'll play Warzone with my buddies, and I'm there just to hang out and relax, and then I finish and I'm like, God damn it, I'm so I didn't do as well as I wanted to, and then I'm looking up help videos after, and I don't know, it ends up not always being relaxing, but
it's a contradiction, right? It's you're trying to compete, but you're also trying to the intention came in to relax. And if you relax and don't play well, then you just get annoyed and frustrated, right? But I think it depends on the activity too. Just working out is relaxing for me because it's not direct competition. It's still working toward a goal, but just getting in the gym and completing a workout, I feel good every time. There's very few times that I felt ugh, that was not worth it.
do you feel that way too about training? If you just get out in the backyard, work on your backhand on pickleball, is that a relaxing time for you too?
I would say half and half. Working out is always a relaxing time. Pickleball training is about half and half because if I'm trying to work on a specific skill and it's just not coming together for me, or I'm spraying balls all over the gym, it can be extremely frustrating. Why can I not figure out this shot or whatever? But working out, I almost never feel that way. I never, 1% of the time do I leave a workout that was awful or something like that. Most of the time I just feel great getting in there, getting a good pump and heading into work,
Yeah, sounds like you're not lifting hard enough. Because if you were really lifting, you're not feeling relaxed by the end of that one. That's why your deadlift numbers are so weak.
Well, man, oh my gosh, I deadlift more than you. But there's a difference between mental and physical, right? Working out to me isn't as, it's like very physical, where my body feels tired afterward, but my mind feels relaxed. Versus like at work, I get mentally taxed, or even with the children, like I get mentally and physically taxed. But at work, I get more mentally taxed. And by the end of work, I'm like, I need a nap, but my body's like ready to roll, even though my mind is like exhausted from all the processing and all the conversations I've had throughout the day. So I think it's like separating the mental from the physical there. But I don't know, everybody's different, right? Like some people, you're a more social guy. I'm sure you like get a lot of, we'll call it relaxation or decompression, by like just going out to dinner with your friends or going out and having a drink or whatever and having a good time and laughing, right? And for me, it's like I prefer just like hanging out
I'm
and on
actually
the
an
house.
introvert. I don't know if you knew that. That
No,
is like the
I didn't
least
know that.
relaxing time for me is going out to dinner and going out to a bar or something like that.
Me too,
Yeah.
normally.
So like I would much rather go to a court and just hit some shots by myself and like I'm working on my high line for an hour, listen to a podcast.
Yeah,
Easy, you know.
yeah.
Yeah. It's funny, we
Learn
always come
something
through
new
these
every
and it's
day.
like you we always think we're gonna contradict each other more and it's like, oh no. Wait, we're actually kind of similar in that.
Yeah,
All right, imposter syndrome.
yeah. Let's get into it.
Beautiful. So I think we all experience this. Actually, when I was doing some research for this one, I found a stat. Let me actually pull it up real quick. This was from a scientific paper in 2011, and apparently it estimates that 70% of people will experience a bout of imposter syndrome at some point during their life. So more than likely, you're going to experience imposter syndrome either in work or in life or in sports or relationships, whatever it is, at some point in your life. So in your research, how did you define it?
For me, I think it's the feeling of either that you are undeserving or that you are not capable of doing something or being put in a situation. For example, I think it comes up a lot in work. For example, you've become a manager, but you almost, part of you doesn't, it's not just not feeling confident in your ability, but feeling like, do I really, like, should I really be here? Like, do I really deserve to be in this position? And like, am I going to let people down around me or be exposed as like a fraud? Like, I'm not actually a manager. I'm sort of like, feel bad about it.
Yeah, well, fraud is the word that kept coming up. Like you feel like a fraud. You feel like you're not worthy, even when you have achievements that you've gained through work. It's just feeling like you haven't really earned them. But I think you touched on an interesting piece there that I hadn't really thought about, which was this feeling like you're letting people down piece. And that was when I had experienced it at work. It was a feeling of shoot, I'm not actually as good. I don't deserve this stuff. I'm letting the people down around me. So I wonder if there's multiple types of imposter syndrome, or if that core feeling in the end is always feeling like you're letting somebody down.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess it's whether or not you consider it relating to other people or just internalizing yourself. And I would say it's probably interlinked, and I think the letting people down part is a result of feeling like you're a fraud. So it's like, I feel like I might be a fraud in this situation, or that I'm not prepared for this role, or I shouldn't be here, or I don't deserve to. And thus I am going to let people down, or I feel like I might let people down.
Yeah. So when's the last time you felt it?
I don't know. I think when
Never. Roger Parent has never felt like an imposter. He's always locked, always confident.
I think the big thing is like, I just believe in fake it till you make it. So anytime I've felt like I don't belong, I've always felt like that is part of the journey. I felt that way for a while. Like when I started my own company, I was like, I'm going to act like I'm a, $5 million CEO. And I wasn't, right? Like I was just like getting paid pennies to try and just survive and pay my mortgage. And, but I was going to like try to act like I was bigger than I was. Just so I would say there was an identification that I was an imposter, but I felt like that's sort of the point. like I'm going to fake it until I become that.
Mm.
So yeah, it's hard for me to say. I never looked at it as, or I never had an issue struggling with it as a negative thing for me. I always just felt like, yeah, like of course I don't deserve it, but I'm going to find a way to deserve it.
Yeah, that's interesting. So that kind of actually links to the podcast we did on manifesting, where I don't know if you were doing this intentionally or not, but you basically manifested yourself as a $5 million CEO and you just acted like that until you eventually became it.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing because it's part confidence, which is like I'm going to become this and I'm going to find a way, but it's also part humbleness to say I'm not that right now, but I'm going to become it. It's like yeah, it's just part of the journey, right? It's like you can't you can't just be thrown into a manager position at a company already fully trained on how to become a manager. Like it just doesn't work that way. Like you do a good job mid-level and then you get promoted to a manager and then you got to figure that out. Like it's like you learn as you go. So I think that it's people too often have a negative association with imposter syndrome when I think it's just like, if you're feeling that imposter syndrome, that's great. You must be going through some big growth right now that's going to make you way more valuable over the next couple months, years.
Man, that's so funny because I wanted to ask you on that because in my experience, I've pretty much only felt the negative from imposter syndrome. So, like the biggest time
Mm.
that I felt it was actually when I started working for you the first time. And those first 18 months when I really had no idea what I was doing, every single day or week, I thought I was going to get fired. Straight up. It's like, how do I still have a job here? How am I still employed? I don't know what I'm doing. I don't deserve these accounts. And for me, it was just like anxiety at all times. Like I need to, but it does like manifest itself in positive ways where the result outcome was that I just worked super hard and I would do a ton of research and try to figure stuff out to get rid of the feeling of that anxiety. But the negative piece of it is like I had anxiety all the time and I thought I was gonna get fired and I thought I wasn't good at my job and obviously I haven't been fired yet, so I must have been doing something right. But
It doesn't
it
help
was
that I
always
threaten to
like,
fire you like every week too.
well, yeah, yeah, true, yeah. You didn't realize the damage that was doing to me.
Kept saying, how's this
Uh,
guy here?
yeah, but no, for me that was always it was always like a negative thing when I felt imposter syndrome.
Yeah, I mean, that's really interesting. But what separates you, what to me, what has always separated you from, and I want to bring up a story about you because I think it's important for context
Get
that,
the TikTok camera rolling.
yeah, what has always separated you is that when you're in that state of high anxiety or high stress or imposter syndrome or whatever we want to call it, you have always responded with grit and hard work. And the story I want to bring up is like, being completely honest, like I had my sort of like New England reign on volleyball for a while, where it was like I probably won like 100 New England tournaments, and
That's exaggerating, but okay.
I don't know, over 15 years. But anyway, like we were, you were in the volleyball scene for a while, and just like always semi-finaling, and then through hard work and adversity, like you stuck with it and continued to grind and grind and grind. I feel like from my perspective, you were stuck in a plateau for years and you kept grinding. And then like something unlocked around the time or after you joined Digital Position, where it was just like you kept grinding until you figured out how to like really compete at that level. And I don't know what it was that clicked with you, but I always respected the fact that like most people just like hit their plateau and just get stuck there. And for you, it's not like you just hit the plateau for like a month or two. You were there for a while. I thought that back when like you were younger, but you were there for a while, like just quarters and semis and quarters and semis and quarters and semis. And then you just broke through what felt like out of nowhere. But to me, that was like years of just grinding and grinding and grinding and working on yourself. And that's what I always respected so much about you, is that you like with Digital Position and with volleyball, you just like found a way like when those, you didn't let that toxicity of like, oh, another quarter, another semis, just stuck here, cause you to just like switch sports or leave or like give up. You kept grinding, you know? And I don't know, maybe you have a different take on it, but that was like sort of my view of your upcoming in volleyball.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because like I can kind of point to the pieces that were like, oh, I thought that was a breakthrough or plateau, and then I thought that was a breakthrough or plateau. So like we all plateau just in everything that we do. You're gonna hit plateaus and you have to find a way through. I think the thing that I always came back to is I just liked playing volleyball. So like why would I stop? You know? And then
Mm-hmm.
I guess the way I'm wired is I'm not going to just do it for fun. I'm gonna do it at the highest level that I can do it, and I'm gonna keep trying to improve. So no, like in the moment, it's a super frustrating process. But thinking back, like it wasn't that hard. It's just that you just got to figure stuff out. So I mean, imposter syndrome is kind of the same way. Although I haven't felt it as much in volleyball, but it really is. You just hit a plateau and you feel like you don't deserve it. You just have to grind until you find a way to improve. So I guess in that way, that anxiety can be useful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's do you think there's some sort of fear of embarrassment of like that pushes you to be better such that you don't feel embarrassed? Or is it just anxiety like you want to prove to yourself that you can do it?
I think it's both. Especially looking at the imposter syndrome piece. Like I think embarrassment is probably a big part of that, where you're almost like embarrassed to have some of the success that you've had.
Mm.
Especially we talk about the fear of letting people down with imposter syndrome, which is kind of an embarrassment. They're kind of linked, right?
Mm.
So in that way, those two are very linked in terms of you're worried you're going to let people down. You're worried that you're going to be embarrassed in front of other people. You know, like our brains are still kind of wired for that. 2,000 years old mentality where if you embarrass yourself, you might get kicked out of the tribe, and then you're going to die alone. So our brains are still kind of wired that way, even though it's not an actual reality in 2024. But that fear still exists in our brain somewhere.
Yeah. Yeah, good point. So what do you see as like the signs and symptoms that you are experiencing imposter syndrome for people that are like, I'm not feeling confident. Is that imposter syndrome? Because I think what I see culturally happening is that like everybody's just like throwing imposter syndrome all over the
Yeah.
place anytime they don't feel confident in anything. And, what do you see as like the signs?
Well, I came with 5 things that I think when you are experiencing these signs, you can do to improve it.
Hmm.
So I'll run through those real quick. If you are feeling imposter syndrome, and maybe it's not exactly imposter syndrome, but the core issue is the same, where you're maybe at a plateau, you feel like you don't deserve what you have despite the recognition. You know, if you have awards, you have good finishes, you don't feel like you deserve it. So we have to figure out how to overcome that, and that's what we're trying to deliver here. So one, a really good strategy, recognizing and tracking your wins. So look back at your last 90 days, last quarter, last year. You probably have a bunch of wins in there, right? And if you recognize and track those, that reinforces this narrative. You know, we talked about it on the narrative thing. You have to reinforce this narrative that you are good at what you're doing, and you can track those wins to reinforce it and reinforce your narrative.
Hmm. Cool.
Second thing I had, these are maybe dangerous, number 2 and 3, but it's a lot of comparison stuff. So comparison, super dangerous. I think we both know that's like especially with imposter syndrome, that kind of comes from comparing yourself to other people. But if you do it in a non-emotional and objective way, it can actually be pretty useful. So compare yourself to a previous version of yourself. Are you better now than you were a year ago? For example, I played a little mini tournament last weekend, and I didn't feel like I played that well, but ended up going to the finals. And it was a recognition of, man, now I'm at the point where when I don't play well, I can still beat some good teams. Where a year ago, if I'm not playing well, I'm not beating these good teams. So even though I didn't feel like I played well, it was still a recognition of improvement. Now,
Mm.
comparing yourself to others, that's super dangerous. But if you do it in an objective way, that can be useful. For example, compare yourself to others in your pay range, at your point range if you're in a sport. Are you having more success than them? Yes or no? If no, maybe it's not imposter syndrome. Maybe you're just not as good as you need to be, and you need to improve. But at least that's kind of an objective thing that you can measure against and see: do I need to improve, or am I just being way too hard on myself?
It's also just like the law of relativity there, where it's just like who you choose. If you compare yourself up to professional athletes all the time, and you're not a professional athlete, you're probably going to just feel like crap all the time. And if you compare yourself to just like the worst sports performing people, you're going to feel great about yourself all the time.
Yeah.
I think it's just like you sort of need the identification that both exist and that very few people are at the very top or the very bottom of the spectrum, right? And it's like the vast majority of us are in the middle somewhere. And so you're trying to compare maybe slightly above you, slightly below you, and say like, what does it take to get that next step up, one step up? Like right now, I'm probably like a 4.7 to 4.9 pickleball player, trying to get to the 5.0 range. There's the rating system basically, and so, what are those 5.0 players just a couple points ahead of me doing? And also, what is differentiating me from the 4.5 players just below me that I can build on, right? So I could still feel good that I'm making that progress, but also I still have something to strive for. So I think it's just like, it gets toxic when you're just like, I'm going to just compare myself to unattainable things right now, or people way below where I'm at, 3.0 players, and be like, oh, I'm so much better than them. It's like,
Yeah, totally.
yeah, I'm not going to go play a 3.0 tournament, slaughter everybody and feel good about myself. Like, that's just childish. It's like, so that's, I think, the toxic side of it.
Yeah. Another thing too is knowing your KPIs if you're at work, or knowing your targets if you're an athlete, right? What do you want to finish in a tournament? Are you doing it? Are you achieving those goals? At work, what are your KPIs? Are you hitting them? Because like, if you're hitting them, there's really no reason to feel like an imposter. You're doing what you're supposed to be doing, right?
Yep.
So that was
Yeah.
one of the things
Point.
that kind of helped get me
Hard
out of it
data.
when I was a digital position. Was I looked at the hard data and I was like, oh wait, I'm actually kind of hitting all the KPIs that I'm supposed to hit. It's like maybe I'm not so bad at this.
Yeah, I would have fired you if you weren't. So
Exactly. Yeah. Last thing, and this actually is a great segue. It was asking for feedback from a manager or mentor, because I can point to the exact moment when I stopped feeling this at digital position, and it was, man, maybe like a year and a half ago, but it was a Slack chain that my manager sent me, and it was like, yeah, like Frank's done really well. I think he can manage any type of account now. I was like, oh my God, like I'm actually kind of good at this. And so that feedback wasn't sourced; it was just kind of given to me. But by asking a mentor or a manager, like, what do I need to improve? Am I good at this? That can be kind of the reassurance that you need to push through imposter syndrome.
yeah, love that. I want to talk a little bit about the difference between imposter syndrome and low self-esteem and self-doubt. Again, sort of going back to that the initial conversation of like, what is imposter syndrome? Imposter syndrome, I want to go back to that like unfair or exposed as a fraud feeling. Because to me, that's what really differentiates it from just low self-esteem or self-doubt. Low self-esteem, you're simply just not feeling good about yourself, or you're not confident. Self-doubt, you're not confident in your abilities. It's more of a broad brush. But there's a difference between just not feeling confident and not feeling confident and undeserving, and that you might get exposed, right? So I look at imposter syndrome as a much more specific, almost like element of self-doubt or low self-esteem. Clearly they're all linked, but I want to at least identify the differences between them. Do you feel that same way? Could just say yes. I mean, I could just be
Yes.
right. Okay, great.
I'm trying to find another way to think of it. No, I
No,
think
you don't have
nailed
to
it.
think about it another way. I love being
Roger,
right.
you're wrong. It's funny because we made the outline for that question, and I was like, I don't really know how to answer that one. And you're like, I'll just handle it.
Yeah. There we go. All right, moving
Yeah,
on.
great answer. Great answer. All right, so let's wrap up with this. I think it's a little more questionable, but you think imposter syndrome can be a good thing. So make the case why you think imposter syndrome can be a good thing.
Yeah, I think if you identify that feeling like you might be undeserving of the role or whatever that you're in is a completely natural feeling and part of the journey. I think it's like going back to the Frank Field example of grit and hard work. Like we are supposed to hit plateaus. We are supposed to hit areas of discomfort in order to continue to grow. If everything was comfortable, we wouldn't grow. So I think imposter syndrome itself can be good, not in like a toxic negative way, but just, hey, identifying, hey, I might not be in a position I'm entirely qualified for right now, but I'm going to make myself qualified for it. I'm going to find a way to be qualified for it. I'm going to learn here on the job and I'm going to make it work. And before you know it, you're just like totally qualified to be in that position. Right. But it takes some time. Right. So, yeah, I think it could be good for that reason.
Yeah, like the anxiety can be a good thing if that pushes you to greater heights, but that anxiety can be super detrimental. So just be aware with it. We gave you guys some strategies on kind of how to address it. I just realized that we didn't bring a quote. So Roger, why don't you give us a quote off the top of your head to close this out?
I got one for you. Ready?
All right.
Trust yourself. You know more than you think you do. Benjamin Spack.
Shout out Benny Spack.
Nice.
That's a good one. I think imposter syndrome can be a lack of trust in your abilities, right? So
Yeah, you might
trust
be
yourself.
entirely qualified, right? And you're
Yeah,
just like,
totally.
you just think that you're not, but you actually are.
Yeah.
So it's, yeah, love that.
Sweet.
Play us out.
Easy peasy. Imposter syndrome. Thank you, everybody, for listening. Hopefully, you learned something. Hopefully, you can implement one of these in your life. Stay tuned for episode 14 coming next Thursday. Thank you, Roger. We are out. You.